Thank you, Scotty. Wait a minute, this might be too stuck together with tears at the moment. I have to say I love Gary like a brother, and I swear I never kissed a man on the lips until I kissed Gary. I have this simple system by which I can measure friends in Los Angeles, and it goes something like this. If you were stuck in the rubble of an earthquake, who would you most like to be stuck in the rubble with you? Who would be the guy who would value your survival as much as he valued your own? Who would work with all his creative energy to get you both out of there? And by that criterion, Gary was like at the top of the list of friends. On the other end of the spectrum, who would you want to most spend a night drinking wine in some beautiful Italian villa? And once again, Gary was right there at the top of my list. And that kind of ability to span the spectrum was one of Gary's great skills. He was able to do it with such grace. He was he loved mechanical things, and he also loved art. He was a guy's guy, but he had the soul of a Jewish mother. He was the most non-judgmental friend you could have. He judged people by either you're an asshole or you weren't an asshole. And if you weren't an asshole, then no matter what, he loved you unconditionally. But if you needed advice, he would be the first to give it to you in an unadulterated, straight way, and you could take it to heart. He occupied both ends of the spectrum, not like a chameleon who kind of can go back and forth. He was always unapologetically Gary, and everybody loved him all the more for it. Like a lot of us in this audience today, I considered him one of my very best friends, and his loss leaves a crack in my heart and a hole in my social schedule every Wednesday night when we played pool. Our lives, I think, are diminished by his absence. And the only good that can possibly come from this sad day is if we can all keep a little bit of Gary in our heart and live each day with a little more joy, and love our friends more open-heartedly, and express our enthusiasm for things like Gary did without reservations. And then maybe loving him will kind of make a huge difference in our lives. I loved him a lot. Thanks.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Pete Tony's, Barbara's moth-eaten older brother. I'd not be remiss if I didn't echo some of the remarks that some folks have said, and I think Ryan said it the most eloquently. You all have been just absolutely amazing on helping us through this loss. It's just been incredible, the love and support that you've given the family, and from the bottom of my heart, thank you. As Barbara's older brother, I assumed many responsibilities as we were growing up, the most important of which was to pass judgment on her boyfriends. Not that Barbara ever cared what I thought, but in truth, most of them were pretty nice guys. I even remember one or two of their names. But then along came Gary, and it was like, wow, this guy is different. It's kind of like being raised, driving Honda Civics, with Toyota Corollas, and then one day up roars this red hot, fire engine red Ferrari. And you say, that is what a car is supposed to be. The other thing I remember about that day was what I call the Gary moment. I think everybody here has had that. I've seen it 1,000 times. And Barbara introduced us. I stuck out my hand, expecting the traditional shake and return, and instead found myself being hugged. And we didn't do that in our family. We just didn't do that. And it wasn't just a simple little shoulder hug. It was a full-on bear hug. And that was it. I was a Gary fan, and I have been ever since. Barbara and Gary had an amazing relationship. Not just because they complemented each other so well, which they absolutely did. Gary, the gregarious, outgoing, energetic adventurer, entrepreneur, Barbara, the responsible, cool, analytical businesswoman. They were just an excellent match in that way. But they shared so much. They were both extremely creative. They both loved music. They both loved to travel. They both loved cooking. Well, in Gary's case, eating Barbara's cooking. But the thing they shared the most was an unconditional and total love. You saw it in everything. And it was just a blessing to be part of that, to be witness to it, and to experience it. It's made me better. It's made our family better just by having been around that and experiencing it. You learn. Together, they built successful businesses. They raised 2 terrific kids. They built a house, which they turned into a warm, welcoming home, which they loved to share with their friends and family at every opportunity. Over the last 2 weeks, I've listened as everybody came by to pay their condolences and told their stories about Gary, every one of which was absolutely hilarious. But every one of those stories had another common element, and a lot of people have touched on it today, and that was the kindness of Gary. He had done something for every single person that came by, and they remembered it. And as somebody else said, to myself, taking from what I've seen over the years with Gary, is I'm going to try to be more Gary-like in my own life. I have a short note that I want to read from Barbara and my mother, Hazel, otherwise known to Gary as Ma. She couldn't be here today because of some health issues, but these are her words. Every time I visited LA, I felt like I had entered a special world of Gary and BJ, where I could wrap myself up in the love and laughter, and where I made many lovely friends. Like everyone, I have a million stories about Gary, but one I will always remember is being at Barbara and Gary's home one summer day when there was the usual gaggle of 10 and 12-year-olds playing in the house. All of a sudden, Gary cried out, "Everyone, go home and get your towels. We're going to Raging Waters." And off he went with a bunch of kids in his spontaneous, fun-loving way. Gary brought that spark into the life of everyone he knew. Thank you, Gary, for the legacy you left me of beautiful memories and friends who will keep you with me forever. I am blessed to have such wonderful memories of our life together. Go in peace. Go in joy. Go in love. Ma.
I had an editorial building on Highland Avenue in Hollywood. And one day, this fella knocked on the door in this thick New York accent, said, "Have you got a cutting room to rent?" And I said, "Yeah, I do, actually, the one right next to me." So Gary rented a cutting room, and we became really good friends. He didn't often pay his rent, but I loved him just the same. In the 80s, well, first of all, we worked down there together for a number of years, and I would try to talk any producers that I was working with to hire Gary to do their trailers, and some did, and the stupid ones didn't. In the 80s, I got married in the 70s to my lovely wife, Barbara, the 2 Barbaras, and we bought a house in the valley, and we started having Christmas parties, Christmas dinners, which started to be 10 or 15, and this turned out now to be about 40 in our little tiny house. And every Easter, every Christmas, every Easter that they were available, Barbara, Gary, and Shane and Ryan would come to our house. Sometimes Hazel would come when she was here from New York. And we always had a great, great time. And everybody who were our friends got to be their friends. Gary said, "Why don't you buy a motorcycle and start going riding with me?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I had a bike in the 60s. I don't know if I want to get on a bike again." So he talked me into buying one, and we started going on Sundays to the rock store. So I talked my brother-in-law into buying a bike. I talked Stanley into buying a bike, and 2 or 3 other people, 4 or 5 other people. So we would either meet in front of my house or meet in front of Gary's house. And Barbara started calling us the croissant and cappuccino gang, you know. And we were in all kinds of occupations. And so we would go down to Huntington Beach or to the Rock Store or whatever for years. And on the Love Ride, Christmas time, we would go down to Skid Row and take toys to the homeless children. We had a lot of things that we did together. It was a lot of fun. Gary then quit editing and bought his, started up his motorcycle shop. I was one of his first customers. Didn't get a discount. Tried to remind him how much rent he owed me. It didn't matter. So anyway, I wanted to say that in the 80s, he brought this 6'5" I was sure she was that tall, blonde to our house in a T-shirt that I'll never forget, and said, "I want to introduce you to Barbara." So our blonde, his blonde Barbara, and my blonde Barbara. I tried to say that 10 times. Anyway, they got to be really close friends, and then we started going to their home on New Year's. And the first time we went there, there was all these people, and I said, "Who are these people? We don't know any of these people." And we figured, how could Gary have this other life around that didn't jive with our Christmas and Easter? So anyway, first of all, I wanted to mention this T-shirt that I bought from Gary. And I wanted to say how impressed I was and how grateful I was to Barbara for posing. This is actually Barbara. Nobody will believe that, but it is. And anyway, Christmas, New Year's, and Easter, not going to be the same anymore. Next Sunday is Easter. Be our first Sunday without him. I hope that Barbara and the kids show. And I want to say that Gary is up there with George Mather, John O'Banion, Jim Eric, and all the other friends that we don't know. And they're going to have a wonderful Easter together. I miss him, I love him, and he'll always be Gary, and I guess I'll always be Jameis. Thanks.